AZD9291 or osimertinib is a next-generation EGFR inhibitor that specifically works against the most common reason patients develop resistance to first-generation drugs, that is mediated by the T790M mutation. And in the pivotal clinical study in the phase 1/2 clinical trial, about 60% of patients who had developed resistance who had the T790M mutation responded to osimertinib with a minimal side effect profile. So we're very excited about this medication. It was approved in the United States just over a month ago, and it's clearly a new option for patients who develop resistance to existing EGFR inhibitors. There was a phase 1 trial initially that evaluated the dose of the medication, and that evaluated a range of doses from 20 milligrams a day to 240 milligrams a day. And the middle dose, the 80 milligram dose, was picked as part of as the dose to go forward. And the reason it was picked was that that was a dose where we saw efficacy. In fact, we saw efficacy across all the different dose levels from 20 to 240 milligrams. There was no dose-limiting toxicity, and a maximum tolerated dose was actually not identified. The 80 milligram dose was a sweet spot where we had activities just as good as in the other doses, but it was a dose level where we didn't see some of the toxicities we saw at the higher levels, and some of these are toxicities that are mediated by EGFR, including skin toxicities and gut toxicities. So then at the 80 milligrams, a dose expansion cohort was done, and a separate dedicated phase 2 clinical trial called the AURA2 trial was also done, and these form the basis for the approval of the 80 milligram dose for patients that have developed T790M-mediated resistance to existing EGFR inhibitors. Certainly the approval gives doctors and patients a new option that didn't previously exist. Until osimertinib, patients who failed EGFR inhibitors, their options included chemotherapy. This gives patients a new option, an option that's beneficial in the majority with a good duration of benefit and a PFS. So I think that's the first exciting thing for patients. There are other unique features of this medication that I think are very, very useful. The first is that it crosses the blood-brain barrier. And so we have seen activity in patients who have brain metastases as well as leptomeningeal disease, which again is a problem for some of the existing EGFR inhibitors. Second, because of the toxicity profile is so favorable, it offers the opportunity to do combination therapies, something that we couldn't really previously do with our existing EGFR inhibitors, partly because of overlapping toxicities. And so when you try to combine something with, an existing EGFR inhibitor, you ran into toxicities. And the hope is with this new medication, with osimertinib, that will be possible. And there are, in fact, clinical trials ongoing. And finally, I think the option now includes and is ongoing is to figure out, is this a medication that we should give after patients have failed first-generation EGFR inhibitors, or should we give it as the initial treatment? If it's an effective agent, it overcomes the most common resistance mechanism, should we save it for a second, or should we use it first? And there is a clinical trial ongoing asking whether osimertinib or gefitinib is the right therapy, a randomized phase 3 clinical trial where patients are randomized to one of these treatments with a progression-free survival as the primary endpoint. So I think there's a lot of excitement for not just treatment today, but as a building block moving forward in the field of targeted therapies for lung cancer.